Hello everyone, my name is Megan Lavoda and I'm an ENFJ. Today I'm going to be talking with you all about the cognitive functions stack and how that works in one's personality. Now, this isn't the first time I've talked about cognitive functions or how the stack works on my channel, but I thought of another way of looking at it that might be helpful to some of you all who are in the process of learning about these cognitive functions. This video also is not going to be completely comprehensive. It's more just something I haven't heard that many people talk about before, so I wanted to share my thoughts on it. So if you have any questions about how this works, comment below and I try and do a video answering a question directly from you all once a week. But pretty much, for those of you who are maybe newer to understanding these things, there is feeling and thinking as two ways of judging, sensing and intuiting as two ways of perceiving, and then extroverted and introverted as two orientations for those main four functions. And when you do the math and you do all that, put it all together, you get 8 cognitive functions. And I'm going to link below the cognitive function stacks for each type. There are 4 of those that we identify with, our ego likes to identify with, while there are 4 that are in the shadow that our ego does not like to identify with. Whether we see other people using those functions or even when we are using those functions, if something's in the shadow, we view it as other. We don't like to view it as a part of ourselves, at least naturally. And the whole integration process of diving into your shadow, you can sort of take what your ego already identifies with and then integrate that with the parts of yourself that you don't identify with to sort of become whole. And what I believe is that each individual, like, we are like a microcosm of humanity. We are a microcosm of God, of everything, of oneness. And so if we can figure out how to make ourselves whole, we are then going to reflect oneness in the world. So that's why I think this work is so important. So anyway, I've already did a video about the ego and the shadow and that integration process, and I'm going to link below that video as well as all of the functions that go with it. But sorry about that. But anyway, what I want you guys to understand about how all of the 8 cognitive functions work is that they're going to work very differently based on how they are in your stack. And a lot of people, when we talk about these functions, like even myself, I've made lots of videos where I'll be like, introverted thinking is like this, introverted feeling is like this, extroverted sensing is like this. And if you watch or listen to my podcast, Synchronic Saturdays, we do our best to sort of talk about these functions in isolation. But the truth is, these functions are never used in isolation. They're always used in a position in your stack. And so what I think, even though, okay, I'm going to also give a rundown of these basics, reminder for those of you who already know. Extroversion is the objective outer world, where introversion is the subjective inner world. Sensing is physical facts. Intuition is abstract concepts. So if you were going to look at like NI, NE, SE, SI, you would just put together, okay, if something is extroverted and something is intuitive, what does that mean? Do the math. It is the objective outer world of abstract concepts. And when you really break it down to these simplistics, these simple definitions, and you just do the math, put them together, what I've done is like really contemplate, what does that mean? What is a objective concept or an objective abstract concept? Or what are abstract things that exist in the outer world. So you could take a minute to contemplate those, right? But what I'm trying to say in all this is that, yes, like as I've done in my podcast, we can talk about these in isolation, but really where it is on your stack, it's going to make a huge difference in how it manifests. So let's just talk about your top 4 for now. Let's like completely ignore the concept of shadow functions for now. For me as an ENFJ, I use FE and then NI and then SE and then TI. So the purpose of my TI as an ENFJ is to serve my extroverted feeling. The purpose of my SE is to serve my NI. And this whole idea of to serve, who is serving who? When you are looking at yourself and when you're looking at other people, when you're trying to maybe type other people or just understand other people, there's always going to be this aspect of control, of control. Something is serving the other. So even within your ego, even within the parts of you that your ego enjoys to identify with, which for me, obviously, I love to identify with my FE and my NI. Those are my top functions. You know, many people believe that my FE and NI are the conscious functions, and that's true for many people. Most people don't know how to use their tertiary inferior, their third and fourth, to serve the desire of their top 2. But that doesn't mean that we don't identify with it. Because, for example, as an ENFJ, my TI exists to serve my FE, whereas if you were an INTP, your FE would exist to serve your TI. And so the way that an INTP or ISTP is going to use FE is going to have a completely different energy to how I use my FE. And even though as much as I like to identify with my TI, if my TI is not serving my FE, I'm not going to care about it. I'm not going to reward it. So it's like, you can think about your brain, your cognition, your ego, whatever you want to call it. You can think about it as there being like a president, a vice president, and then like their little confidants, their assistant. So if FE is like the president of my brain and then NI is like the vice president of my brain, then like SE would be like the vice president's assistant, and then like my TI would be like the president's assistant. They're assistants, so they don't have much control, but they are very important. The work they do is very important, and they have a seat at the table when you're making a decision. But we can tend to view our third and fourth function as sort of like the grunt work, the stuff we don't really want to do, but we also recognize that it's important. It doesn't have much control, doesn't have much weight on you, but at the same time, it does sort of have control. So I could talk all day about this because it's so nuanced, and I hope that I didn't confuse you by how I'm explaining this. But I guess really what I want to convey is just the idea. In this video, I want to just convey the idea that it's about what function is serving what and for what purpose. Because even though my second function, my NI, has a lot of power, it still it has to meet the demands of FE. It has to do what my FE wants to do. And so I think that, you know, it's easy for us to think that our dominant function is like the best function, the one that we're the best at, and all of that. But if you view all of the functions in your head, even the shadow, you can even bring in the shadow. If you think of all the functions in your head, do you want to have a democracy or do you want to have a dictatorship? Do you want your dominant function to have a dictatorship over the rest of the parts of you? Because I think that's what a lot of people are doing. Your dominant function will always be the dominant function, but it should listen to the input of the vice president. It should listen to the input of the assistant. Imagine a business or a country or whatever where the president and the vice president didn't get along and the president just wasn't even listening to anything the vice president said. Like, ideally, they should work together to come up with conclusions together. Like, my FE and NI, they work better together as a team. It's not so much that my NI is directly serving my FE the way that my TI is, because my TI and FE, they're like on an axis, and so they have the same goal from different angles. You can't have TI truth without FE. You can't have NI understanding without SE. It all ties in together. And so many of us, when we're talking about these functions, we want to separate them. We want to say, oh, I use really, really good FE, but my TI is really, really bad. It's like, you can't possibly be good at meeting the goals of your FE if you are not using your TI. If I was to use a personal example, I want to help people. I want to have a purpose. I want to be recognized, appreciated. I want to be seen. I want to belong. I want to be loved. I want to find my tribe. I want to have good vibes. I'm not going to be able to do that if I can't use my TI to be discerning about what opportunities make sense, what people make sense. I'm not going to be able to do that if I can't hone my crafts, which is a lot more of a TI thing, actually take time alone to improve my skills so that I have something to offer. Just the FE desire to be nice won't get you anything, really. You need something. It's like, I like to call the inferior function the diamond in the rough, because for me, my TI is the diamond in the rough. It serves my FE. I cannot make people happy if I can't trust my own discernment, if I don't know who I am, if I haven't taken the time to hone my skills, if I don't know what I'm talking about, if I don't have a sense of identity, if I don't have anything interesting to say. I mean, some FE DOMs, without recognizing their inferior TI, they will be in conversations and they'll just ask you about you, and they'll nod and they'll smile and they'll say, wow, you're so interesting. But what are you adding to the conversation if you have nothing to say? I mean, whenever I've improved my TI, it's like, then I'm like, oh, I was reading this book and here's my opinion on this thing. It's like, do you have an opinion? Like, honing your opinions, knowing what they are, knowing, having interests. I think that both TI and FI are both interests. I mean, because they're your identity. They're a personal judgment. It's just a slightly different way. So that's just an example. But you cannot do what your president, your dominant function, wants to do without learning to get along with your other functions. And most of us don't do this. And I'm not trying to shame anyone if they feel like they don't do this, because I think that the state of humanity right now is that we don't do this. And, you know, Carl Jung and the Isabel Myers and like Myers-Briggs people, they didn't talk about this. They didn't talk about how to use your functions to be a better person and to integrate yourself and become whole. These are my theories. So take that with a grain of salt. I don't know what that is, guys. This is something I thought of myself, and I'm not saying it's a completely original idea. It's influenced from Carl Jung. It's influenced by the individuation process. It's influenced by like shadow work theories about integrating, becoming whole, holding space for things. It's really like, it's not like it's that out of left field, but I guess what I'm trying to explain is that Psychological Types was written almost 100 years ago, and the state of consciousness, the state of humanity, like he was just now discovering what those functions are. He wasn't thinking about how to use them in order to serve the different parts of yourself, you know. And so I guess I'm just trying to say, like, for those of you who disagree with me, that's completely fine. Like, you can have your own theories, but no, I'm not just getting this from a book. This is my opinion. This is, you know, how I've come to think about things from studying this stuff for 8 years. I think that most of us don't have this figured out. We don't know how to rely on our lower functions to do its job. And we have inner turmoil when these functions aren't getting along. You know, like if our dominant function just sort of rolls in and is like, whatever I say goes, then that's a recipe for inner turmoil. And if you're interested in me helping you through this process with your own stack and help you be integrated, I am offering mentorship that you can apply for below. If you are needing help understanding where, what your functions even are, like what your personality type even is, I have a service for that below as well, if you're interested. And I want to know, like, what of these theories that I've touched on today do you want me to expand on and explain more of? Because I want to make this easier for people to understand and not just, you know, ramble all the time, because I do I get my best ideas from just letting myself ramble, and I really appreciate all of you that do enjoy listening to me talk, because I definitely wouldn't have come this far if it wasn't for you guys appreciating me. Yeah, it's about what's serving what. So when we're defining these things, introverted thinking, for example, no matter where it is on your stack, is going to have a different job, and it's going to be valued differently. But this hierarchy doesn't have to mean that one thing's more important than the other. It's just that some things are going to take a front seat, some things are going to take a back seat. I think that whenever we incarnate as a human, or however that process happens, whatever you believe, we choose our cognition for a reason, for a specific goal. And for whatever reason, my specific goal in life has something to do with FE. It is important to me. It's in charge. And so it's in charge. And I think because I care about harmony, right? It has inspired me to try and think through these things. And I'm not using my TI in the same way as a thinker is. Whenever I'm studying Carl Jung's functions and everything, I'm trying to figure out how to find harmony. I'm not trying to figure out the truth and test it, which is fine. If you have TE as more in charge, maybe you're going to want to, you know, create a system of truth. For me, I'm trying to create harmony, inner harmony and outer harmony, and that is what's motivating all of my learning and all of my pursuits, and that's probably why I've even come to this conclusion, is because the only reason why I even want to know these things is so that I can please my FE. Everything I'm doing is always to please my FE, and everything that anyone's doing is always to please their dominant function. And I know that's why, you know, I call the dominant function the autopilot function. And people call it other things like the savior, which I agree with that sort of wording as well. Dave Superpowers calls it that. And yeah, we can get a little bit in control, and we also can dismiss the value of our subordinates. We can dismiss the value of the subordinates when the subordinates have value too. Just because they aren't in charge doesn't mean that you can get your job done without them. So anyway, thank you for watching this video, and thank you for bearing with me. And yeah, I'm really excited to explain more of this stuff. And yeah, thank you guys so much for subscribing and sticking with me. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day.